Good morning, guys. How are you doing this morning? My name is Gabriel, or Gabe. I am from Birmingham in the UK, and I'm at the Myers Pontelungo School, which is in Rome. So that's where I am holed up at the moment. If there are any students on this morning, please write in the chat. Let me know who I'm speaking to, who you are, where you are, and how you're doing this morning as well. We are going to be looking at culture this morning, particularly with regards to culture clash, culture kind of synthesis, that kind of thing. So it would be great if I could have as much feedback as possible. This would be good. So we're looking at this phrase to start with, lost in translation. What does lost in translation mean? To any students watching either now or on the YouTube feed later on, what does lost in translation mean? I don't know if you have a similar phrase in Italian, if it's a literal translation, or if there is some kind of figurative translation of some sort. But what does lost in translation mean? Is there anybody out there? We have it, the reader says that we have 5 students on, but no one's writing as of yet. Anyway, yeah, lost in translation, we are going to be looking at moving abroad in general, or traveling abroad, and some prepositions with regards to culture shock, culture clash, that kind of thing. Okay. Lost in translation for me, maybe I can tackle this term myself, I suppose is the sense that words and phrases in one's own language become, when literally translated, somewhat, their meaning is lost or is reduced in some way. Hey, Bruno from Milan. Nice to have you on, Bruno. How are you doing this morning? And what does lost in translation mean to you? Can you maybe give us a definition of what lost in translation means? What do we mean by this phrase, lost in translation? Bruno from Milan. Is there a similar? Is it a direct literal translation as well in Italian? I wonder. I'm not entirely sure. Gisella from Genova. Okay, is that better, Gisella? I'm hoping the sound is better like that. I'm just told that my breathing is too loud otherwise. I will try and close my window as well. But what do we mean by lost in translation? Question to Gisella and Bruno. Are you still hearing my voice in double, Gisella? Hi, Fabrizio. Is my voice still in double? Okay, it's not. Great. Thank you, Gisella. So what do we mean, guys, by this phrase, lost in translation? Can you give me perhaps a definition, a working definition? Right, okay. Can you hear me and see me now, guys? We're having trouble with the video and the audio for some students, it seems. Can you guys hear me? And can you see me? Apologies for anybody who might be able to. We seem to be having some technological problems, some connection issues. Right, okay. Give me a second. I'm going to... Give me a second, guys. I'm just going to try and leave the broadcast and then come back. Apologies for anybody who can Is that better? Question to Gisela and Bruno in particular. Is this better? I hate technology so much. I hate it when it goes wrong. It's there's nothing you can do. Fabrizio says it's right and clear, but I'm still waiting on Gisela and Bruno to give me a response. You can hear me, Bruno? Good, okay. All right. I'm sorry about that, guys. So what do we mean by the phrase lost in translation? No. How about now? Can you hear me now? I wonder why Fabrizio and Bruno can hear me, but Gisela, you can't. It seems a bit strange to me.
Okay, I'm just going to wait for Gisela to give me an answer for that. But in the meantime, okay, Bruno says he can hear and see me. Fantastic. So Fabrizio said, maybe when we try to translate something from another language and the sound, it will be different or weird. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's spot on. I mean, maybe even, what do you mean by the sound there, Fabrizio? Do you mean in the sense of, in the sense of the meaning of something? Because I think absolutely spot on if that's what you're driving at. I think potentially when something gets translated too literally, and then the meaning, potentially the sound as well, but the meaning becomes distorted or lost in some way. Is that what you mean by the sound, Fabrizio? And thank you for letting me know as well. That's great. Okay. Let's move on to the first slide. Okay. So we're not going to look at the video. I just want to have a look at these first couple of questions. If you move to another country, do you think you'd find it most difficult? What do you think you'd find most difficult to adapt to? Yes, the meaning, exactly. Yeah, that's kind of what I was driving at as well, Fabrizio. Yeah. What firstly do we mean by culture clash as well? This is another kind of, I suppose, similar phrase when we talk about things that are lost in translation. What is culture clash? What do you think culture clash might mean? Gisella and Bruno as well. Culture clash, and also, as we can see in question 5, what's the difference between culture clash and maybe culture shock as well? Oops. Okay. Something against our culture. Okay, yeah, something that clashes with our culture, that is conflictual in some way, Gisella. Can you give me an example? And yet, is culture clash the same thing as culture shock as well? Fabrizio said, I think that it is a difficulty I think that is a difficulty of facing opposite habits in some way. Facing to another opposite habits. Yeah, when there are opposing habits between different cultures. Yeah, absolutely. facing up to another's opposing habits. We could maybe phrase that better as saying facing maybe opposing or opposite. Maybe opposing or opposite habits facing one another in some way. Yeah, absolutely. And Bruno said, the difficulty is being used to living in another country and culturally clashing by mistake. For example, hug a Japanese woman for us is normal. Oh, okay, I see, yeah, okay. So, for example, hugging a Japanese woman for us is normal, yes, but it isn't normal in Japan. Absolutely, yeah. Just a note on that, Bruno. I would probably use the gerund form of hugging because it's the activity of hugging. Hugging a Japanese woman. Is normal for us. Yeah, absolutely, but is potentially socially quite rude in Japan. Yes, absolutely. That's a really good example. What about question 4 then, guys? If you move to another country, where do you think you'd find it most difficult to adapt to life? So it's interesting that Bruno's raised a kind of cultural shock between Japan and Italy. Maybe not even Italy as well, maybe certain other European countries. Where do you think you'd find it most difficult to adapt to life? And where do you think it would be easiest? And Fabrizio said also related to religion. Yeah, I agree as well. What can you give me an example of that, Fabrizio, as well? Can you give me an example of religious or spiritual cultural conflict in some way? I suppose because culture is so multifaceted and so and often runs so deep within us that, yeah, we were only thinking about kind of national social rules and social etiquette, but I think it's a really good point you raised religion too. Okay, Bruno said, in the habits and traditions that are different. Is that in relation to religion, Bruno? In the kind of religious customs and traditions? Absolutely. Yeah, sorry. And Fabrizio said, if you move to an Islamic country, you would forget. Or perhaps you you would forget to behave as you behave in Italy, or you perhaps you wouldn't behave, because you've started to use a great conditional sentence here, it seems. I think you might say you wouldn't behave as you would behave in Italy. You wouldn't behave as you would behave in Italy. Yeah, it's quite true. I think also maybe even within the different sects in Christianity as well, I think how maybe historically Catholicism is more deeply ingrained in Spanish, Italian, and French in the kind of Mediterranean country remit, as opposed to in Northern Europe, where there's more of a Protestant, a kind of a Protestant ethic kind of deal. The ideas framed around work and around things like, I don't know, things like your relationship to food, things like your relationship to socializing, I think are quite markedly different as well. So, I mean, even within Europe too, there's huge differences, maybe culturally, religiously. For example, in Italy, Bruno said, you can eat beef, but not in an Islamic country. Do you mean pork in that sense? In Italy, you can eat pork, but you can't in Islamic countries. That's absolutely true, though. Yeah. Yeah. So it reframes completely your relationship with food too. What about question 5 here? Do you think some people experience culture shock when visiting your country? What aspects of Italy would surprise them? That's all right, Fabrizio. And Bruno said, we aren't used to eating dogs. In some countries they do. Yeah. Food is another huge one. It's probably the most immediate way of interacting with massive cultural difference, isn't it? I totally agree, Bruno. What about Italy then? Or even your own cities, your own hometowns? I suppose there's a smaller difference. But what about cultural shock in Italy? I don't know if Gisella, you're still with us as well. What do you think about culture shock in Italy? Do you think that some people experience culture shock when visiting Italy? Or you're from Geneva, aren't you? I think. Yeah. Fabrizio said, as an Italian, when I move to another country, I think that my difficulty is always about food and, of course, also about language. Really good sentence. Fantastic. I would just say, because you're a singular person, you would say as an Italian. You were a single Italian, so we need the article. We need the article before it, but otherwise that's a perfect sentence. Really good. Hello, either Serena or Andre. In Italy, they eat horse. That's quite true. I had a horse burger in Syracuse a couple of years ago. That's a really good point, actually. we I think in the UK especially, that's I don't know, seen as quite, I don't know, the horse is some kind of sacred animal, I think, even in I don't know, it's just not acceptable to eat it, really. It's not been acceptable for most of our cultural history. In Italy, they eat horse. That was for me difficult to understand. Yeah. What else, guys? What about people who come to Italy as opposed to you being an Italian going to other countries? That's a good point, Bruno. I think that some foreigners are shocked when they hear about our politicians. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. When they find out, or when they hear about hear about, or maybe find out or read about our politicians, I think is probably the best way of phrasing that. Yeah. In what way, Bruno, do you think then that people imagine Italians are all the same as the politics in Italy? One I read about in Paris was, you were talking a little bit about this earlier, Bruno, about Japanese tourists. This is quite a common, not quite a common, but it's so common that it's been given a name. I don't know if you've heard about the Paris syndrome. It's when Japanese tourists experience an extreme kind of culture shock in Paris based on the difference between what their ideals of Paris are in movies, in books, in travel guides, and what the real Paris is actually like. And there are cases of Japanese tourists, I think, breaking down and suffering from nausea and sickness, based upon this kind of conflict between ideals and real life, which I think is quite a crazy form of culture shock. Fabrizio said, for foreigners, I think that culture shock visiting Italy will be our bureaucracy. That's a really good example, Fabrizio. I've struggled with that massively, because you have so many different offices and so many different forms and things in order to, and unless you know people here, that's a really good example I wasn't thinking of. We are the country that makes complicated the simple stuff. Absolutely. Even better way of phrasing that, I think, would be, just because in English we tend to put the direct object right next to the verb, we would say we are the country that makes the simple stuff complicated. That's spot. Absolutely, completely agree. And Serena said, Italians love physical contact, so they kiss and hug a lot. That's very true. In my country, we are very reserved and handshake. Yeah. Spot on. Yeah, quite true. All right, let's move on. So we've got some work on synonyms here in this text. So as I read through, look for synonyms of these 5 kind of categories on the right. We have easy, a comfortable life, annoy, and enjoy. So I moved to Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, about 6 months ago. I thought the whole process would be a walk in the park and that I'd be living the life of Riley, but I found it really hard to get used to. Some of the customs here have really peeved me. Recently, I visited the Independence Palace with my girlfriend. I was admiring the beautiful architecture while standing with my hands on my hips, and a passerby disapprovingly shouted at me. Also, last week, I was standing on the metro with my arms crossed and received a similar reaction. The etiquette here is driving me up the wall, but although these customs grate on me sometimes, I'm getting accustomed to the country and I'm having a ball meeting new people. Just before we look at the synonyms, the beautiful way our country overcomes negativity. Okay. The way that our country overcomes negativity. That's a really good example as well, Gisela, maybe. Yeah. Especially at the moment, I think that is especially the case, isn't it, Gisela? I think a lot of countries around the world are finding, in the example that Italy has set, I know that the UK has, and despite its early stubbornness, I think has really valued as you said, the way that Italy has been overcoming negativity in some way, overcoming hard times. That's a really nice point as well. Okay, so looking first of all for a synonym of easy. So it could be a single word, or it could be a phrase. Looking for a synonym of easy. What do we think? Bang on. Okay, Fabrizio has got it here. Easy. If we say something as a walk in the park, it means it's very, very easy. It's a walk in the park. It's a pleasurable experience. It's so easy. Okay, Bruno is asking what peeved means. This one is coming along, Bruno. It's one of these synonyms here. Do you think you might be able to guess which one it is? Yes, spot on, Gisela. Easy, a walk in the park. What about a comfortable life? Any ideas for a comfortable life? This phrase is a little bit old, is a little bit dated, I think. I would not use this phrase. It's a little bit strange. It's not very common in informal language on the street, I think. Okay, maybe I'll give you this one because this one people seem to be struggling with. Life of Riley. Living. If you say you're living the life of Riley, it means you're living a comfortable life. Little bit old. Not very common. And then we have annoy, peeved. Exactly. Well done. Gisella and Fabrizio are on it. So if you say that something has peeved you, or yeah, so we need the direct object being a person in this case. You could also say that he was really peeved as well without the object. It means annoyed, exactly. There are two other synonyms for annoyed. Where do we think they are? Okay, that's a really interesting suggestion, Gisella. I don't think that it means annoyed in this case, but I think if you stand with your hands on your hips, in a way, you're expressing annoyance. It's not a direct synonym, I don't think. I don't think it's the one that's been given. But I see where you're coming from. Bothered is a synonym of annoyed. It absolutely is. Bothered is not in the text, though, I don't think. You're absolutely right, Bruno, that bothered is a synonym of annoyed. But we're looking for two more in the text here. So we have peeved. There's another one towards the bottom down here in this section. What do we think? They are two, one of them's quite a long phrase, a stock phrase that we use, and one of them is a phrasal verb. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Fabrizio. It's because I've got two screens open and I couldn't see that it's obscured. That's why you guys aren't getting it. I'm really sorry. That's my fault. annoyed. Custom. Okay. Having a ball is one of the phrases. It doesn't mean annoyed, though. It says having a ball, meeting new people. Yeah, I'm sorry, Bruno, that's my bad. Any ideas, guys? Would be fantastic on this program if you could have some dots for indicating when students are writing, because I think there's a little bit of a delay between writing and when we read the messages. So in many cases, we don't know if you guys have already written. Maybe I can reveal them. Okay, so if we say something is driving us up the wall, you could say, for instance, will you stop cracking your knuckles? Will you stop clicking your fingers? It is driving me up the wall. Yes, spot on, Bruno. The etiquette here is driving me up the wall. If you say that something is driving you up the wall, it means it's really annoying you. You really hate it. Stop doing that. It's driving me up the wall. And there's another one here, which is grate on as well. If you say something grates on you, it means it annoys you a little bit. To grate on its own as a verb means to kind of, so you can grate things like cheese. It's when you cut cheese with a kind of metal device with which to break cheese up into smaller parts. You can also grate vegetables. I don't know if that's similar in Italian, it might be. So if something grates on you, that's the phrasal verb. It means it irritates you. It's got that quite physical meaning, kind of physical sensation in the meaning, but it means it annoys you. So the three synonyms for annoyed really are it peeves me, it drives me up the wall, and it grates on me as well. Okay, and what about the last one? Enjoy. We got a synonym for the last one. Yeah, and again, just whilst whilst I'm waiting for the students to respond. These three are quite common phrases in some respect. There's quite a few ways to say that something annoys you in English, I think. This is also a fairly common phrase. This one, no. A Life of Riley is not well known. So I would ignore this one, basically. It's not a really a necessary thing to learn. It's a bit archaic. Stufo. Stufo, I think, is so Bruno's asking if great on is the same as stufo in Italy. I think stufo is more the idea of being, is kind of more the idea of being fed up or bored with something. Whereas great on is something that irritates you more. It's a source of annoyance and irritation. Stufo, I think, is more like I think is more like being fed up or maybe tired of something. Bruno. I don't know what scocciato means. I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to reverse scocciato. Okay. Scocciato is more like annoyed. But I feel like stufo is more like tired and fed up. Whereas to be tired and to be fed up with something is not the same as to say that something grates on you. If something grates on you, it's more like a pet peeve. It's something that irritates you to the point of angering you. Whereas I think to be fed up, to be tired, to be bored with, there's less energy with it. I hope that makes sense in some way. And okay, so enjoy. We have having a ball. Exactly, Fabrizio and Gisella. Having a ball means to enjoy something a lot. Also a fairly common phrase. This one again, not really necessary to learn. Yeah, they're very subtle differences though here with stufo and with grate on and peeve and drive up the wall. I think there's more energy involved in these phrases of annoyance, Bruno, than with being bored or tired or fed up with, or sick of, maybe you could also say. Yes. Okay, it's 10:02. I have to leave you now. I'm really sorry about the tech issues at the start. It's sometimes very difficult to know if you're being heard or not. But I hope that was useful in some way. And if you are around later on, I have another 10 to 13 with my friend Emily, who I usually co-host with. So if you're around at 6, we have another 10 to 13 then. So if not, enjoy the rest of your day and have a really good Easter, guys. Bye-bye.